All right, so I am officially done with preclinical. All right, so it is Monday afternoon and I just got back from my OSCE. It started around 1 o'clock, so this morning just got up, worked out, and then just was prepping for the OSCE. We had 3 encounters. One of them was a psych case, and then the other 2 were neuro cases. So in the psych case, it was really just like talking to the patient, trying to get the whole story, asking questions about their life and maybe certain stressors that are going on that might have been contributing to the way that they're feeling and their symptoms. I've honestly liked the psych sort of cases or interviews more than I thought I would. Sometimes when the patient is supposed to have something like schizophrenia, it can be a little awkward, but for stuff like anxiety or depression, I just think it's really nice to not really worry about doing any sort of physical exam. You're really just talking to the patient, having a conversation. And while you're supposed to be doing that in any sort of encounter, it's not exclusive to psych, I think it's easier to get into that mindset because you're spending the whole 25 minutes doing it when you're on an OSCE, as opposed to trying to maybe rush through that part of it just so you can fit in your physical exam, like the neuro cases. For the neuro cases, one of them was coming in with the chief complaint of a headache. The headache case was pretty straightforward, and then the numbness case was a little bit more interesting. After talking with the patient, doing physical exam stuff, we also got an MRI afterwards. It was pretty clear that it was some sort of stroke. Not one of the typical strokes, something a little bit more specialized that would only give numbness on one side of the body. So that was kind of a cool case. I was pretty confident in that one because I watched a Boards and Beyond on strokes the night before, just prepping for our actual exam. So as soon as she was like, yep, just numbness on one side of the body, no motor, anything, no other symptoms, I was like, all right, I know what kind of stroke this is. In terms of the exam, it is in 2 days. We have our exam on Wednesday of this week instead of our typical Friday. So it's a little unfortunate because we're losing 2 days of studying. Thankfully, I had my OSCE today though, so I can kind of get it out of the way and just focus the next day and a half on prepping for the exam. I'm feeling pretty good about it. Like I said in my last video, I think this is probably the exam that I've studied for the least out of all my other ones. It's a mixture of maybe a little bit of senioritis and just having gone through so many exams at this point. I feel like I know how to study in an efficient way. I know what works for me and what's been working for all the exams that we've taken so far. So at this point, I have pretty much reviewed all of the lectures and everything that we've had. I'm really just doing practice problems. Usually we have a weekly quiz, so I've been going back over those, retaking them, going over the answers, seeing why I got it wrong. And I'm doing some of the AMBOSS questions. Those are always really helpful. And that's pretty much it. Tomorrow I will focus a lot on studying for some of our longitudinal classes, which is health system science. I usually save going over that course's material for the day before the exam. So in terms of prepping for the actual science content, there's not too much else for me to do. All right, so I am officially done with preclinical. I just got back from my exam, started this morning at 8 o'clock. Took me about 3 hours, so finished a little bit early, which is normal for me. I felt pretty good about it. There were definitely some questions that I was like, what the heck is this talking about? But for the most part, everything was pretty fair and sort of what I was expecting. I already know that a lot of the pharmacology is gonna screw me over. Pharm in this unit was pretty insane between all of the different drugs for Parkinson's and all the antipsychotics and benzodiazepines. There was just so many different classes, and even just for Parkinson's, there was 4 or 5 different classes of drugs that treated the same condition, and they did very similar things. For a lot of different classes of medications, just broadly, they will have the same suffix. So all of the statins end in statin, most of the ACE inhibitors end in pril. But for neuro and psych drugs, that's not always the case. So it was kind of hard trying to remember what medications fell into different classes, because that's sort of the first step of remembering what the mechanism of action is and what conditions they can treat. So other than pharmacology, I felt pretty okay. The psych stuff was not too bad. There was more brainstem questions than I was hoping for. Brainstem is probably the most complex topic that we went over, so that was unfortunate, but who knows. I have the exam review in a few hours. I feel like I passed. Might not be as good as some of my other exams, but that's okay. That's the one benefit of a pass-fail curriculum. So we'll see in a few hours officially, but for right now, I do feel pretty good. So in terms of going forward, I don't really have too many responsibilities now, aside from we do have another CBSE on Friday. The CBSE, or the Comprehensive Basic Science exam, is basically a practice step 1. We took one at the end of our 5th block, which was our cardio, pulmon, renal, which was in the summer. It was like the last thing that we had to do before our summer break. That was not super helpful because we hadn't taken our GI or Neuro and Psych classes, but the exam still tested those topics, so when a GI question popped up, I was like, I have no idea. So Friday, we have another one of those. Unfortunately, this one is in person. Our first one was virtual, but I think the sort of governing body for medical schools made it so these tests have to be in person now. So unfortunately, I can't go anywhere. I'm still stuck in New Jersey until Friday. So tomorrow, like I said, I don't really have anything to do. So I'm probably just gonna relax a little, try to play catch up on some research responsibilities that have sort of fallen by the wayside during my exam week. So that's really it for right now. I will check in after the CBSE. Alright, so I am done with the CBSE, which means I have no more responsibilities for the next 2 days. No, so the CBSE was this morning at 7:30. Like I said, it had to be in person. And as your normal, like, standardized test setup, the way that the CBSE works is it's 200 questions total, separated into 4 sections, so 50 questions each. Kind of roll right from the first section into the second section, and then you do have an optional 15-minute break in between 2 and 3. I didn't take the break because I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible on a actual like step exam. I would probably take the break. I think step 1 is definitely longer than this was. It was scheduled from 7:30 to like 1 o'clock is like the total amount of time that you have to take it. I think I was done around like 11:30, so I definitely sped through a lot of it. Whenever I take a test, especially these tests that I've been taking in medical school, I like to do a very fast first pass of all of the questions. If I read the question and I know the answer sort of right away and I'm really confident, like I'll answer it and just move on. But if I'm not at least like 90% confident in an answer, I will mark it and come back to it. So on our in-house medical school exams, if there's 130 questions, I wouldn't be surprised if I have like 40 of them that are flagged. And then after I do my first pass, I'll just keep going back through, rereading the questions and just trying to be a little bit more confident in my answer. That's how I normally would take an exam that really counts. But for the CBSE, which doesn't really count for anything, I would read the question, pick my best answer, and just move on. I didn't flag anything and try to come back and think about it more. You know, we haven't studied for STEP yet. A lot of schools will give you 6 to 8 weeks of dedicated time to study for Step 1, which is a good amount of time, and you will improve a lot from the beginning of that to the end. So while these are helpful as like sort of a benchmark of where we're at, they're not super accurate to the potential chance of passing since we haven't done a dedicated study time. You know, for the past 8 weeks, we've just been focusing on neuro stuff, so there was a lot of questions that popped up, like especially some of the infectious disease ones, where our infectious disease course was 10 months ago, where, you know, this seems pretty familiar, but I have not studied the different cytokines or interleukins in so long, so I didn't really have a confident answer. But with that being said, I do think that it is nice and important to take these tests just to get a sense of the kind of questions that are going to be asked. I don't know exactly how well the content of the CBSE lines up with the actual Step 1 exam. As the name implies, the CBSE had a lot of basic science on it. There were so many questions where I was reading it and I knew exactly what the patient had and like how to treat it, but then was asking this super niche like chemical pathway involved with it, and I was like, I have no idea. So I'm interested to see if step 1 is actually like that, or if it's a little bit more clinical instead of basic sciencey, because I've been using like USMLE-RX and AMBOSS, which are third-party resources, throughout my preclinical curriculum to study for my exams, and I've been using like their step 1 Q banks, and the questions in those Q banks are not as basic science detailed as the questions on the CBSE were, and these Q banks are supposed to be geared towards step 1, so I don't have to worry about step 1 for a very long time, but it will be interesting. Hopefully it's not as basic sciencey as the CBSE, because especially after going through a year of clinical rotations, I think the basic science stuff is definitely going to be in the background, and our focus and sort of expertise will be more on the clinical medicine. So right now it's around noon on Friday. I am about to pack up and head back to Maryland.
But now you're gone, and all I have is time. And though you're not here anymore, I still think about you.
All right, it is Sunday. I am back in New Jersey, and I had an awesome weekend. One of the big reasons I went home, aside from just being done with the class, my brother informed me last week that he's not going to be at Thanksgiving, so I wanted to go home, be able to see him before Christmas. And then obviously just being done with the class, that is usually when me and Mackenzie choose to either go back to Rhode Island or Maryland, just because we don't have to really worry about studying that weekend. We can kind of actually take a break. So Friday I got home, didn't really do much, just kind of ate dinner, went to bed. And then Saturday went to Annapolis to go to brunch, and then just walk around a little. It was a gorgeous day. They were having this like tug of war contest, which I've never really heard of, but in Annapolis there's sort of like this relatively narrow body of water where boats will come in and out of, and there is Annapolis on one side and I think it's a town called Eastport on the other, and apparently every year they do a tug of war contest between those towns. So there was literally a rope that stretched all the way across the water. And we were on the Annapolis side, so we were just seeing all these people tug on this rope. And then once we actually moved down to the water, we saw that the rope was going all the way across to the other side. So that was pretty cool. Like I said, I've never really heard of that, but when I told my mom about it, she was like, "Oh yeah, I think I have heard about that." So, and then after lunch, we actually went to the mall to shop for business casual clothes. And the reason we have to shop for business casual clothes is for the majority of our clinical rotations, we're gonna have to be in business casual. For stuff like surgery or certain weeks of OBGYN, we'll probably just be in hospital scrubs because we'll be in and out of the OR all the time. But for family medicine, internal medicine, neurology, psychiatry, we're pretty much going to be in business casual. So a little bit unfortunate that we won't be in scrubs as much as I thought, just because scrubs are so easy. I have a bunch of pairs from when I was medical assistant, but it is what it is. I don't hate dressing up. Main issue is I just don't have that many business casual clothes because I've never had a job that required me to dress business casual 5 days a week. So definitely have to update my wardrobe a little bit so I'm not wearing the same things every single day. The one thing I am sort of worried about is what shoes to wear, because we're going to be working 12, 14-hour days sometimes, and wearing business shoes doesn't sound like the most comfortable to be on your feet all day. So I think once we actually get into rotations and seeing what people are wearing, it'll inform us a little bit better. But for right now, that's all we got. So what is next now that I'm done with my preclinical curriculum? We don't start our actual clinical rotations, mine being internal medicine, until the beginning of December. So we've got sort of a month in between where we do something called a transitional clerkship. One good way of describing it is a clerkship boot camp. So there's a lot of orientation style sessions, like talking about what rounding is and what a typical day in the hospital is and different boring policy and procedure stuff. There are some sessions like with our clerkship directors and students to offer advice, which is super helpful. And aside from all of those more like practical things, we do a lot of like refreshers on really high yield and important medical topics. So we start tomorrow with an hour-and-a-half refresher on EKGs. No one in my class has thought about EKGs since the summer when we finished our cardio block. So that's going to be really great to sort of remind us on how to read an EKG, all of the common abnormalities that we'll see in the hospital and how to identify them on an EKG. Later in the week, we have a refresher on different imaging. So doing refreshers on chest x-rays and CTs, abdominal x-rays and CTs, stuff that we'll see a lot on especially our surgery clerkships. We'll also be learning new clinical skills like how to place an IV, how to place an NG tube. So a lot of exciting stuff. I think these next 4 weeks are going to be super helpful and make all of us a lot more confident as we start our clerkships. All right, well that is going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like below and subscribe if you want to see videos like this in the future. Thanks, and I will see you in the next one.